of our next guest, Lars Larson, host of the Lars Larson Show, which can be heard here weeknights on SuperTalk, Mississippi, starting at 6 o'clock. Good morning, Lars. Thanks so much for your time.
Hey, good morning, Richard, and thanks for the warm welcome. Although a long time ago they told me when I worked in television I had a face for radio, so I had to get out of TV and go to radio. But I've always loved radio more than TV anyway. TV is a lot of blow dryers and makeup, and I just don't like it.
That is certainly fair, and join the club with the whole face for radio thing. I'm right there with you. I'd love if we could start just picking up on the conversation we were having before the break. I think you came in on the tail end of that. The NBC story from over the weekend leading in to the Butler, Pennsylvania rally with President Trump. It was a story about Secret Service and the issues that they have. When you look at where the Secret Service is right now, is it as simple as a staffing issue, an overworked issue, or is it more systemic than that?
No, in fact, I hate to say this. I have friends. I have one friend in particular who works Secret Service, and I don't have much sympathy for their whining. And let me tell you why I call it whining. Number one, the administration has done damage to the agency itself. And take note of the things they have done. Over the last 10 years or so, Secret Service has been in trouble 6 ways from Sunday. We've had agents who've hired hookers, agents who get drunk. One agent, just within the last couple of weeks, got blotto during a party with some of the staffers for Kamala Harris and decided to start, basically groping one of Kamala Harris's staffers. He was so drunk, and this was in front of a whole, room full of people in a hotel, that they let him, they said, we're going to take you back to your room. And the guy was so drunk, he collapsed and passed out in the hallway. Now, when you have behavior like that, you could say, well, there's a bad apple or two or three. But when the people around that bad apple are not exposing it and saying, if you have no business being in our midst, you're not professional, we don't want you, except the bad behavior of the Secret Service goes back, as I said, at least a decade that I know of. And every time it comes up, they say, well, we're going to reform things, and then they don't. So, problem number two, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Did that story happen to mention DEI at all?
It was.
Okay, now here's the thing. A lot of us on the conservative side can make the accusation why you've taken your agency DEI. And if I were to challenge somebody, well, how do you know they have? Because they hired a director who's now been fired. I mean, nobody in Washington ever gets fired. They're just asked to submit their resignation, which is functionally the same thing. And she bragged, we're going to have DEI, we're going to increase the number of Secret Service agents, not based on skill, not based on ability, but based on what's between their legs. And that is a bad standard for hiring anybody for a job. It should never be the standard. And so the day of the Butler, PA attempted assassination of my favorite president, Donald John Trump, they had people on his team, a majority of them were from Homeland Security. Now, like you said, Richard, the people at Homeland Security are perfectly good people. How were they prepared to move from their job doing Homeland Security tasks and investigations over to being dignitary protection? Why, they were given a 2-hour webinar. Apparently, the audio didn't even work on all of the 2 hours. So you have an agency that says we're going to hire people not based on skills and abilities. We're going to tolerate bad behavior. Then we're going to, when we are short of people, on probably the most at-risk candidate. Jill Biden was not the most at-risk dignitary that day. She got 4 times the Secret Service protection to give a speech inside a room in Pittsburgh, PA, a few hours away from where Trump was speaking. Trump is speaking to a huge outdoor rally. They knew at the time that there were at least 5 different assassination plots. I'm not exaggerating that. That comes straight from the federal government. They had already taken a guy into custody on Friday before the Butler, PA shooting, and they have now indicted him for conspiring, as crazy as it sounds, with the leaders of Iran to assassinate Donald Trump. And there were 5 other assassination teams, 2 homegrown, 3 of them foreign. And you know all of this, and you equip Donald Trump with a small Secret Service detail for an outdoor rally, while Mrs. Biden gets 4 times the number of agents to give an indoor speech to a thoroughly screened group of people. Now, I know I run off at the mouth, but that's an indictment of the agency. They have 8,700 employees. About half of them are involved in dignitary protection. An agency with 4,000 employees, that's something like, I mean, I live in Portland. That's 5 times the size of the entire Portland police force. It's 4 times the size of the Seattle police force. And you can't protect a relatively small number of dignitaries with 5,000 or 4,000 people to do it. It doesn't wash. They've ruined the agency. And until they address the DEI and the staffing and the dumb decision making by people on the ground and fire some people and hire some competent people, then I'm not going to listen to their whining.
Do you think, Lars, there is a line of delineation as to when the agency changed? And I asked that in 2008. I live in Oxford, Mississippi. It's where the first presidential debate was hosted in 2008. And I ended up working as a contractor advance lead for the last couple of weeks of the campaign on Senator McCain's campaign. And at the time, that was my first interaction with Secret Service. And I found them to be incredibly professional, incredibly serious about their job. That's 2008, though. You said at least in the last 10 years. So going back a little farther, when do you think this change occurred?
I mean, I almost hate to do it because I know people are going to say it's a knee jerk, but I think it happened during Obama. And I think that's when things began to slide. Obama was pushing DEI. He was just doing it a lot more quietly. But when you tell people in an agency, we're no longer hiring based on skills and abilities, I think a lot of the skilled people, including my friend who's the Secret Service agent, said, I'm out of here. I don't want to be associated with this. It'd be if you had a police force in a town in Mississippi and you say you came to work there as a brand new cop and you had skills and abilities, man or woman, and you looked around and you thought, this place is crazy. They allow all kinds of bad behavior. They don't follow procedure. They are not a good agency. Would you want to be in touch with that? Especially in the last 5 years after George Floyd, the environment has become, even if you do your job well, and you follow all department procedures and you do not break the law, because of the way your agency does not have your back, you can go out and perform an arrest, you can be involved in a shooting, and you, the person, will be toast. You may go to jail, you may be sued, you may lose your professional status, all because your agency won't back you up. When that kind of thing happens, then the good people who have the skills and abilities get out, and guess what they leave behind? The dregs.
Yeah. Visiting with Lars Larson, host of the Lars Larson Show on the Gallo Radio Show here on SuperTalk, Mississippi. Shifting gears, it feels like there's been an almost imperceptible shift in this presidential race just in the last few days. I would point to 2 things. I'm curious to get your reaction on this. One, we have gone from Kamala Harris speaking publicly with no one to she's on this media blitz and she's going on The View and she's going on with Howard Stern and she did the Call Her Daddy podcast and the 60 Minutes interview, all of these things. So that on one side, thinking that they need to get her out there, they don't have a choice anymore. And then on the other side of things, just a slight shift in messaging, I think, from the Trump campaign. I know you tweeted about it yesterday. Betting markets are showing that he is pulling ahead. And the conversation has gone from Trump to don't forget about the House and the Senate. This needs to be overwhelming. And we're almost hearing about a mandate. I'm not sure that the Trump campaign goes that direction if they are as worried about his presidential campaign in and of itself. Does that make sense?
It does. And think about what's happening. I mean, you probably, Richard, I know you've heard familiarity breeds contempt. And for people with again, skills and abilities, familiarity says, hey, I'm familiar with Donald Trump. I know what he can do. I've seen what he can do. America's seen what he can do. What about Kamala Harris? What do we know about her? Well, mediocre DA, mediocre attorney general, nothing much in the U.S. Senate, becomes vice president and goofs around for 3.5 years. And I defend that because she became infamous for showing up at events and to give a speech. I mean, all the stupid things that the VP is called upon to do. The VP doesn't have too many real duties other than being the tie-breaking vote in the Senate when you have a split Senate. And who was it? John Adams. I'll clean it up for radio. The vice presidency isn't worth a pitcher of warm spit. He actually said something else, but we can't do that. The FCC will get us in trouble. So you've got a woman who, when they throw her into this role, and it was unexpected to some extent. All of us were wondering, what are they going to do about Joe? He's falling apart. And for most of America, they didn't realize he was falling apart till the debate in June. Then he falls apart publicly. The party says, we've got to do something about this. They decide to kick him to the curb. They apparently, sounds like his account too, threatening to use the 25th Amendment, as all of us suspected. And they pop her right into that slot without a single vote, without even asking the delegates. They just tell the delegates, this is who you've got. Well, then they say, we're going to hide her.
For a second.
We're
up against the break. We'll continue this in just a moment with Lars Larson, host of the Lars Larson Show. This is the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk, Mississippi. We're back with you on the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk, Mississippi on this Tuesday morning. Again, 4 weeks from Election Day. Lars Larson is our guest from the Lars Larson Show. We've got just about 5 minutes left with him. Lars, I have primarily worked in the that'll work. A lot of good stuff to get to. I primarily have worked in the sports radio and television world over the last decade or so. Have had the opportunity to fill in for Paul with him out a little bit. Sports betting drives a lot in the sports world, and sometimes is a really important gauge of what's really going on. On September 18th, Kamala Harris, according to Polymarket, had a 52-46 lead over Donald Trump. Yesterday, just before lunchtime, there was a massive swing. It's been swinging kind of in this direction over the last couple of weeks that shows Donald Trump with now a 54-46 lead in these Polymarket polls. Polls not the right way to describe it. How much credence do you put in the betting markets as opposed to more traditional polls for judging what outcomes of elections will be?
You know, Richard, I take all polls like a weather vane on the barn. It kind of tells you which way the wind is blowing. And one of the things I'd remind you, one of my producers in particular, Joel Maha, watches those betting markets all the time. But remember who the betting markets are informed by. We're on talk radio. Spoken word's the single most popular format in radio. It wasn't 35 years ago. It is today. But 10% of America is listening to talk radio. The other 90% is getting their info from TikTok, ABC, NBC, PBS, CBS, etc. And they're getting bad information because most of the mainstream media has been all in for Kamala, including CBS. You'll notice that of those interviews you mentioned, she's going on the sex show, Howard Stern. Oh, I repeat myself, the sex show, Colbert, the not serious show. Oh, and CBS, the ones who completely twisted the last debate, the vice presidential debate, and said, hey, we're not going to have fact checking except for you, J.D. Vance. And she's going to go on CBS 60 Minutes. But already what's come out of that interview, she gets blown up badly. And I think a lot of Americans are waking up saying, who the heck is she?
Bill Whitaker did a pretty good job with some follow-up questions,
did a good job.
In fairness.
And she didn't do a very good job of answering these questions. And Richard, here's what stunned me. I've never run for politics, never want to, but if I did, I would go into it knowing people are going to ask me certain questions. Now, there are ones you can't predict. Could you, if you were Kamala Harris or her staff, predict, I will be asked about inflation and they want an answer. I will be asked about the border and they want an answer. I will be asked about Israel and about Ukraine, sending tens of billions of dollars to a useless war in a notoriously corrupt country. I better have answers for those. She hasn't had answers, not even anything that passes. You know, if you know the boss is about to call you in and say, what were you doing with a company vehicle? You don't come in with all this, I grew up a poor middle class kid, blah, 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 blah. You come in and knowing what the boss is going to ask you. And in this case, the voters are the boss. And you have an answer ready. If you don't, you're not up to any job. You couldn't run a 7-Eleven.
I want to switch to the Middle East. We've got a couple of minutes left, which is certainly not enough time. As we have talked about this war over the last couple of weeks, obviously it's about Israel and Lebanon and the proxies with Hezbollah and Hamas. But the bigger issue to me is Iran, and maybe the bigger issue of that is what I don't feel like anybody's talking about, and that's China and what role they may play in this and where they stand in terms of relations with Iran. I understand when the G7 leaders say to Israel and to Benjamin Netanyahu, we need to cool this thing off a little bit, wanting to try to avoid World War III. But I also get Netanyahu going, you know what, we've tried that, and it hasn't worked, and we're going to defend ourselves. We've got every right to do so, and we're going to stop when we're ready, not when you tell us to.
And Richard, if a criminal gang like a cartel, this hasn't happened yet, but I can imagine it, start launching missiles and daytime attacks with personnel from Tijuana into San Ysidro and San Diego, we would not tolerate it. We would smash that gang flat. And now all of a sudden, Israel, attacked 1 year ago yesterday, goes after the people who did it and said, we're done with this. We're wiping Hamas out. And the rest of the world says, oh, you can't do that. That's so mean. Why, those terrorists, they've used this tactic of surrounding themselves with innocent people, their own people in Gaza and hostages. And you can't kill them because you might kill some of these people. What do you do in a situation like that if a terrorist organization says we're going to protect ourselves by just surrounding ourselves with innocent people? Go ahead. You can't attack us, but we can keep attacking you. And by the way, even after October 7th a year ago, the first thing that came out of Hamas was there will be more October 7th. So when a terrorist organization says we've slaughtered 1,200, we've taken hostages, we still haven't given them up, including 4 Americans that Joe Biden seems to have forgotten about, like he forgot about the people in Afghanistan, and like Kamala Harris forgot that there were people in harm's way when she said, I'm the first candidate with no people in harm's way. And all these service members are sitting there saying, where the blank do you think we are? That's what they're up against, and they have a right to smash those terrorist organizations flat. But what we ought to be asking is, where do those terrorist organizations get all of their funding, all of their training, and all their weapons? And there is one answer: Iran. Where did they get the money? That's not a mystery either. They got it from Joe Biden. Joe Biden unfroze their assets and said, go ahead, sell as much oil as you want at $80 a barrel. And the Iranians are sitting on tens of billions, and he put it in their pockets.
Yep. We unfortunately are out of time. Lars Larson, thank you so much for your time. Have a great day.
God bless Paul Gallo, too.
Have a great